Welcome back to some more fun with AP World History. Today we're going to look at Islam and primarily at the beliefs in Islam. So starting off here, Islam is a monotheistic religion that worships God known as Allah. And this God Allah is the same God that we saw in Judaism when Judaism was formed, known as Yahweh, and then that we see in Christianity where it becomes a Trinity with Jesus, God, the Father, and then the Holy Spirit. And so this is that same God as just a new religion based on the teachings. And the man that developed this was Muhammad. And the teachings of Islam were brought to him by the angel Gabriel, who recited it to him. He memorized it, and then he later had uh, his students and pupils write it down because he was illiterate and could not write or read. And so all his teachings go into the Quran. Um, and then there are some other teachings that he didn't necessarily give as part of being a good Muslim, but are taken down in what are called as the Hadiths. And sometimes these are used as guides for Muslims to give them another way on how to um, live their life as a good Muslim. And some of these are very, very reliable, and others are not as reliable and have some of the very extremist point of views, like if you are a martyr for Muhammad, or not for Muhammad, but for Islam, um, you will get 72 virgins when you die. And this is nowhere in the Quran, but it's only in a hadith, and it's not in a very reliable hadith. So the proclamations of some of the terrorist groups over in the Middle East, like Al Qaeda and ISIS, are not entirely true or not accepted by most mainstream Muslims. And so Muhammad proclaims this faith, and the basic beliefs of it are that you have these five pillars. And so you have the Shahada, the Salah, the Psalm, the Zakat, and the Hajj. And so the Shahada is all about faith, and it's a statement that Muslims make saying that there is only one God and Muhammad is his prophet. The Salah is prayer, which they do 5 times a day, and they do it towards Mecca. Psalm is fasting, which they do during the season of Ramadan, um, which is 40 days of fasting during the day, and then they're able to eat at night and before the sun rises. And then you got the zakat, which is the almsgiving, which is just like tithing. And then you've got the Hajj, which is that pilgrimage to Mecca, which every Muslim is supposed to do once in their lifetime. If they can do it more times, awesome. They do it more times. If they can't do it more times or can't do it once, then that'll be because of some physical ailments that have happened, or they don't have the money to do it. For example, if you were going to try to do that, something like that today, it's going to cost several $1,000s, or even way back in the day. It would be very, very expensive if you were very far away. So it made it tough for some people to do it. So it's only if you could afford to make it and you don't break the bank to go do it. Some other things to know about Muslims and Islam is that Muslim means one who submits, and the whole community of Muslims is known as the Ummah. They also have another almost sixth pillar called jihad. And jihad, when you usually hear it, or when you hear it in terms today, usually refers to the holy war and beliefs that some terrorist groups have about the fighting they're doing, as fighting other religions and erasing those religions. Um, and so that is one interpretation of it, but primarily what it actually means is struggle with oneself. So they fight to be a good Muslim in avoiding doing things that are not right or that are immoral. And then last major thing to know about the beliefs here for Muslims is their holy cities. You have Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. And Mecca is really important because it's kind of the center of the faith, with the Kaaba being located there, which is this black box in the middle here, which is actually a shrine that has that is very holy to um, the Arabs. Before even Islam came around, it was a very holy shrine in Mecca, and Muhammad incorporates this into the religion. So, on that note, that it was very holy to Arabians at the time, um, this gets Muhammad kicked out of Mecca because he's saying that there is only one God, Allah, and that these other gods that are being worshipped at these shrines are wrong and shouldn't be worshipped. And so that gets him kicked out of Mecca. And so Medina says, hey, come help us out. We've got some problems between different groups, the Arabs and the Jews and the Christians, and so we think you're kind of level-headed, you can help us out. And so this begins year zero of the um, Islamic calendar, and Muhammad goes to Medina and fixes a lot of their problem because he is the spiritual, and there he becomes the spiritual and the religious leader of Medina, and this will continue throughout the rest of his life, and this will have a major impact when we get into the Islamic empires, in that, in keeping with the tradition of Muhammad, the leaders become um, spiritual and political leaders. And so after a time, after a several years, Muhammad brings more and more people into the fold of Islam, and raises a very large army that then the Meccans come and attack him to try to take him out because they think he's a threat, and he's able to defeat the Meccans, and he eventually retakes Mecca, purifies the Kaaba, gets rid of all the false gods and idols in there, gets rid of it, makes it a Muslim shrine, and eventually keeps preaching and spreading the word of Islam throughout the rest of Arabia. And most everyone converts to it except for really the Jewish and Christian communities, as they see it as a changing of their faith, and that they're already monotheistic and want to stick with what they have. Now, over time, many Muslims or many Christians and Jews will convert to it, but they're also allowed to stay as Christians and Jews because of their status of being earlier renditions on a religion that finally evolved into Islam. So in this map, you can see the progression of it. We start in Mecca and Medina, and then it spreads out from there. 634 is at the end of Muhammad's life. Then it takes over pretty much most of or all of Arabia, and then from there it spreads out, and it goes very, very rapidly. And over 700 years, it spreads to pretty much all the areas that it is today, into Spain, into Northern Africa, Western Africa, Eastern Africa, all the way to the Southeast Asia and Malaysia, and it goes into India as well, and into the mountain ranges in Central Asia. There are only a couple places that eventually reject it or push it out, and that is going to be Spain, and it's going to be India that really push it out and go back to their original faiths, with Spain focusing on Christianity and India focusing on Hinduism. So what eventually happens here, as you can see the progression, is this wasn't just spread peacefully, but the Arabians wanted to, or the Arabs wanted to spread not just the religion, but also gain more trade routes. And so they raided the Byzantines and the Sassanid empires, which were the two major empires at the time that had been fighting each other, and they were both very, very weak and ripe for being beat up. And so what happens is the Sassanid Empire will collapse because of the Muslims invasions, and then the Byzantines will be severely weakened and will eventually be knocked out, but not until 1453 with the fall of the Byzantine Empire to the Ottoman Turks. And so one unique thing with this creation, or with the creation of this territory, is that they didn't necessarily force people to convert. If they were monotheists and believing in Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Judaism, or Buddhism, they were sometimes allowed to keep their status because they were a monotheistic religion, and what they then got in turn was a status known as the dhimmi, which means they're protected, but they aren't a first-class citizen, they're a second-class citizen. And because they are not followers of Islam, they have to pay a special tax called the jizya, which is higher than the regular tithing that would be expected of a normal Muslim. And so we'll see this take different forms. Usually it's a money tax, but sometimes when we get to the Ottoman Empire, we'll see it as a tax of actual children, that Christians will have to give up their children, at least one child, to the Ottomans to join the government or the military. And so the last major thing, actually we got two major things left. We're going to look at the different branches of Islam, and then we got women in Islam. And so The two major branches of Islam are known as Sunni and Shia, and these come about right after Muhammad dies. And there's a question as to, well, who should take over this empire that's been established? Should it be someone related to him, or should it be the best candidate deemed by the community? And the Sunni Muslims say it should be the best candidate deemed by the community. This is the majority. This is who wins out, and so Abu Bakr becomes um, the leader of Islam, the Islamic community, and he becomes the first caliph, and he's given the authority to rule, and he gives authority to the ulama, who are the scholars, to look and interpret the laws. And so this is about 95 or 90 to 85% of the population today, and this is kind of what it is throughout all of history. It's the majority by a long shot. And then the smaller group is the Shia, or is known as the Shia or Shiites, and they are led by a guy named Ali, who is a cousin to Muhammad, and he will eventually become the fifth caliph of the Islamic empire, but he will be assassinated a few years into his reign, and this will cause a permanent split between the Sunnis and Shias. And so they believe that only the bloodline of Muhammad could be the caliph, and they believe imams, who are their kind of religious leaders or religious scholars, are infallible when they come up with their new interpretations or new ideas on things. And so they're the real leaders religiously, and this group is only about 10 to 15% of the population, so much smaller. However, we'll see later this gets adopted by the Persian culture, who wants to be slightly different from the Arabian culture. Now, the last thing we're looking at here is women, and then we're also going to talk about the Sufis a little bit. But originally, women are equal, especially in the Quran. The Quran doesn't say there's any difference between women and men in God's eyes. However, in society, as we saw with Christianity, when it gets adopted by the Romans, patriarchal views come in, and so women are expected to wear the veil, which is known as the hijab. There are honor killings where if a daughter has dishonored the family, she can be killed. There are some protections put in place, though, like infanticide was a major thing before, and that's made illegal. You can't go kill your daughter just because it's a daughter when it's born. And the practice of polygamy is supposed to be stopped. However, it doesn't. Muhammad had multiple wives. Originally, he only had one wife, but he'll adopt multiple wives in order to make political gains. But he says that unless you can love all wives equally and with all of your heart, that is the only time you should be able to have a multiple wives. If you can't, and you're going to love one over the other, you shouldn't have multiple wives. However, this isn't always taken into account, so men still are polygamous, and they have multiple wives at times if they're wealthy. And then the Sufi branch of Islam is more of a mystical branch, and this is where women can get some more say in it. Some of them are more attracted to this branch. This is a very, very small branch in Islam, though, in that it's not as focused on being strict and following Shia law, or not Shia law, but Sharia law. And they focus more on the spiritual and getting to know God and get a relationship with God. And these guys are the major missionaries that go around and spread Islam. And so they're very important, and the most famous of these is probably Ibn Battuta, who studied all across the Islamic world and wrote about his travels and what he experienced at each major place. And so Sufis play a major role, and women will play a role in society, but not as big as initially it was. And so these are kind of the basic beliefs of Islam. And next we'll take a look at some of the empires that are established during this time based on Islam.